So we already know what the sound of the destruction of the universe is going to sound like. We already heard it. It sounds a little bit like this. And oddly enough, it sounds like that last note that they put on this album.
My candle in the night, I will come to call you.
Hello, I'm Notes, and Gazpacho is back, and I'm always excited when one of my favorite bands releases a new album. And Gazpacho is one of my favorite contemporary progressive rock bands out there today. I'm always looking forward whenever a new album is dropped by them, and this is no exception. When I heard that they were bringing out a new album so close to their last release of Demon, I was very, very excited. So even though I've been really excited about each release that Gazpacho has done, I'm also a little bit disappointed with each release since their 2009 masterpiece of TikTok. I'm not saying that the albums that they released were bad in any sorts, far from it. In fact, a lot of these albums, March of Ghosts and Demon, all of these albums are phenomenal albums. It's just TikTok and its predecessing album of Night were both such masterpieces that they tend to outshine those that have come afterwards. And unfortunately, we have the same thing here with Molok, but we'll get into that a little bit later. First, I kind of want to talk about the story and the concept of this album. With Gazpacho, they're a big fan of those really deep concepts on an album, and not just story-wise, but the themes of those stories. Each album is dealing with another rooted concept outside of the general story that they're telling, whether it be the concept of haunting, whether it be the concept of what really is evil. Here we have that concept of that battle within us all, of the reason and rationale against that emotional, intuitive, spiritual side that we all have. I myself have that within me. Growing up, that was a really big concept within me of what is this battle going on between my rational side and my emotional side. And so I felt like this album did a great job of pitting those two selves against one another. Kind of presenting us with this concept, we have the story of this individual who is starting to question his faith. We have near the beginning the person praying a lot and delving into their religion, lighting candles in the night, this kind of loss of faith, or this realization that perhaps he didn't have the faith that he thought he did. And then that over-analytical side of him, rediscovering that really all that we're seeing here is stone. We're seeing that within the Druids of England with the Stonehenge, and we're seeing it with the temples that we're building, these giant cathedrals of churches. All of it, we're really just worshiping stone here. When he sees all of this, and he sees, well, everything is just like a rationale, perhaps everything is just following an equation that's already been set down. If this is the case, we could create a machine that would just replicate what we've already done. Taking that equation of life, the universe, and everything, and plunking it into this machine and seeing what happens, and that's what he eventually does. Which, oddly enough, destroys the entire universe. Now there's this whole concept that it can only work without having any light on it. It can only work in like the darkest crevice of this cave. There we have a lot of images of being enlightened. Plato and his cave, right? And there's a lot of different images that we can pull out of just this guy working on this machine. When I think about this, if this guy is creating this, this computer network, what's really to stop whatever that simulation is doing from creating its own Molok machine? So within my mind, the machine's already been created, and that machine is the album that we're holding. And so by playing it, we're playing that simulation that this story is saying this guy is creating. And so if we take that one step further, then his creation is also creating a simulation. And then that creation is creating a simulation, and then that, and further and further and further, and each one is destined to destroy the universe. And I believe it would be that collective effort of each one destroying the next comes into a head, almost like when you're listening to feedback, which is when you are amplifying that white noise. And so that's what I think this is happening, with each one getting faster and faster within the coming destruction of its own universe. All that destruction happens at the same time, and bam, that's the end result. That's my own little take on the ending of this album, and that's why the ending note is just that pitch of noise. It's that accumulation of noise. So let's talk a little bit about the actual music found on this album. So oddly enough, much like the concept of this album, where you've got that pitting of the rational thought against that emotional feeling, the music here kind of mirrors that, in that the logical thought and the rational analytics and everything about this album is very good. The musicianship on this is top notch. The concept of this album and the lyrics, again, are brilliant. Problem I find myself feeling is on an emotional side, I'm not really connecting as well as I have with their past efforts. And this might just be that the TikTok and the night overshadowing this album a little bit, but even on albums like March of Ghosts and Demon, where there was still a few of those moments on there that I loved, this one didn't quite grab me as much as the past works. Now, to give you an example of this, Gazpacho are able to create almost a fluid tactile of energy in their music that swarms around you and blends together within itself to produce something beautiful in the movements and the moments that we're listening to. Here on Molok, we have many moments that are very clear and very skillfully put together, and it's nothing short of masters of contemporary progressive rock showing their full ability and their skill. Gazpacho shows that they know how to create that chilling atmosphere that's needed to tell a gripping story through their music and their lyrics. My hat has to go off to Jan, Hendrik, Ohm, and the rest of the band at being able to craft such beautiful music and lyrics. And I love how much time was spent on the little things on this album. To create more of a prehistoric and timeless feel to the overall presentation of the album, the band utilized very, very old techniques of creating music, especially within the rhythm sections here. They use sounds very akin to almost a tribal music at times, almost like an undiscovered civilization and the music that they would produce. And they succeeded very well in creating this type of an atmosphere throughout the whole album. The overall feel is both prehistoric while also being oddly contemporary and new. Much like that machine of Molok that's created at the end of the album, this timeless new thing. That kind of mirrors my concept of the album as itself being that Molok machine. So logically and rationally, this is a no-brainer of why I should love this album. And I do, it's just, for some reason, I'm not as moved as I was by Demon or March of Ghosts, and without saying TikTok and Night. As I said before, there's just not that quite that tactile energy of movement going on in this album that we've had in the past. There's not that oomph that I'm drawn towards. And I know that the band has already stated that this is a much more subtle and a much more subdued album, and it takes a little bit more listens than just that once to really grab you. And I can see that. The more I'm listening to this album, the more those subtle notes are starting to reveal themselves to me, and the more I'm starting to really get into this album. But even as far as I'm getting into this album, I'm still not getting moved as much as I would hope I was going to get moved by a Gazpacho album. So individually within the songs, the album starts off beautifully with a park bench. It's a great way to really start the album. It really hits you hard, and it's one of the heaviest moments on the album. I'm a little surprised that Gazpacho started the album on such a strong note instead of trying to build momentum to it. The song itself does a great job of building momentum in and of itself, but I'm surprised that they kind of showed all of their hands right from the get-go, because in my mind, Park Bench is probably the best song on the album. It's a great way of showing what the band is able to do within this cohesive song. It shows how they're able to present you with atmosphere. It shows you how the band is great at giving you that great build-up with a really great payoff near the end. The other two songs that I really dig of this album are Know Your Time and the ending, the closing track of Molok Rising. And I think I like Know Your Time for the exact same reasons why I love Park Bench. What can be said about Park Bench can really be said of Know Your Time. Molok Rising is the other side of Gazpacho that I love, and why I look forward to each of their new efforts. We haven't had quite this size of a song since Upside Down from Night, where they plunk down that kind of groove and they start building on it, and they start off slow and they just start to build. Unlike Upside Down, this really doesn't go anywhere. It's just that presentation of the song that really gets you moving in the groove of the song. And I like how they play it out. I do like that they really explore the territory of the song, but unfortunately it doesn't really go anywhere. Especially near the end of the song, where it just kind of fades out, where it's like, okay, this is where we've been, and now we're just going to fade out. And this is the presentation of Molok, the machine, now running. To give more evidence to my stance that this album is Molok, the machine that this character is building, throughout the entire song we can almost hear it ringing and jingling and running in the background. And I think this was done on purpose to show that this album is actually the machine running, and it's the machine that's really going through. And so when the character builds that machine, we start to hear those themes and we start to hear those background noises that we've heard all throughout the album. And then he's kind of realizing, oh shoot, this is where I'm at right now, right? It's that rediscovering. And it takes a couple of listens to really discover, oh, that background noise was what was going on right here. It enhances multiple listens. So even though I've given this album both praise and criticisms, my final verdict of this album, like most of Gazpacho's album, are you need to run out and you need to buy the physical album. If you can find it on vinyl, I highly recommend listening to it on vinyl. So I do have the vinyl, and I feel a little bit cheated because they left out the 7th song of Algorithm, which is a little bit of a shame because it really shows the lead singer's chanting. It really adds that emphasis of this timeless feel. And I'm also really cheated that it wasn't even offered on the digital download that I got with this album. I almost want to say download this album just so you can get Algorithm. It does add to the entire listening pleasure for this. So find it on one of your streaming sites or find it on YouTube and listen to it there. That's really it. That's all I've got to say right now for Molok by Gazpacho. I know, like most of Gazpacho's work, the more you listen to it, the more it's going to reveal yourself. So have you heard of this album yet? Let me know what you thought about the album commenting down below. I love engaging you guys. I love hearing what you guys think about. And I also love different takes on albums. So if you thought there was a different kind of interpretation of this album, let me know down below. And I also want to thank you guys for tuning in and watching me all this time. There's a couple of new albums coming out this month, and so look out for those reviews coming up in the next couple of weeks. And that's it. Notes out.